boards and commissions, and we've had recently a FOIA workshop run by the state of Connecticut. And tonight we're going to have a workshop on Robert's Rules. For those who don't have papers, there is a cheat sheet paperwork in the back, but it's not related directly to this, so if you want to take some notes as you're going through. How many of you are familiar with NECCOG, Northeast Council of Governments? A couple? Okay. Mr. John Filchak, how long have you been with NECCOG?
29 years, 3 months.
Okay.
And
So
maybe a couple
this
of
is a
days.
good opportunity to meet and say goodbye at the same time, because Mr. Filchak is moving on. It's time to...
This may be my last
Well, congratulations.
presentation. Some people will be happy about that. So.
Yeah. So I do want to turn it over this time to Mr. John Filchak, and he will do the presentation for the Robert's Rules of Order. At any time during that, you want to do questions during, questions after?
It's a small enough group whenever people
Okay.
want to. Since you all have this cheat sheet, I'm in a disadvantage because you say, well, the sheet says different.
Yeah, well, there's
Presentation says.
going online, you can find many, many questions and answers in different formats. I had one question before about ex officio members of boards and what rights they have, and I find out one place says you can vote, and most of them say no, you can't. But the one I was concerned with was for an ex officio member to make just a question if they had a point of order to be able to say so during that meeting. So again, I got multiple questions on that one. So if you can start off with that.
I can answer it now.
Okay.
I mean, you as first selectman are an ex officio member by statute for all boards and commissions of the town. So you can go to a Board of Education meeting and participate. As an ex officio, you can fully participate in all the deliberations. You can raise points of order and all of that. I believe, and I have to, I would double check myself on this, that you don't have voting rights.
Correct.
On that. That said, when I've been asked by selectmen, especially when they first come in, should they exercise that right, and I say absolutely not. Unless they ask you to come, I think it's more like having Big Brother show up, and sometimes it's an elected commission, and well, who's this first selectman coming in? And you got enough meetings. Why do you want to go to? I have one that goes to all the planning and zoning meetings, and was formerly on planning and zoning, and sort of there's an intimidation factor too. Well, that's the first selectman. You know, I volunteered to be on the rec commission, and you know, what's he or she doing here? I had one that insisted on attending all Board of Education meetings and got very vocal. And they tried to exclude her from an executive session and got into a big war. It's a conflict you don't need.
Right.
It's like, I'm here as a resource if you need me, but interjecting yourself, it gets really political. Mm-hmm. And I think it's something, my opinion, you don't need. I mean, that's just me, but, you know, some first selectmen like to go to every board and commission meeting and sit at the table and
It's too many.
Yeah,
Thank you, John.
cause havoc. Do you go to all the board and commission meetings?
I can't make certain ones because sometimes there's 2 meetings on the same night.
Yeah.
I try to do as many as possible, especially if they're here. Board of Education is difficult because, not that I don't love them, but their meetings are 2 hours sometimes.
Yeah, that's a whole other issue.
Yeah.
But
I think it's good to go and observe and see what's going on.
that's all. He's not sitting at the table.
You know, but
It's
sitting
different.
at the table and engaging the
Yeah.
commission and all of that, I'm not a fan. I should say, you know, I don't have a good history in this room. Several years ago, I started a presentation, and I was probably 5 minutes into it when someone came in and said, we're going to have to evacuate because the mill's on fire.
Oh,
So that was the day of when it, you know, we went out onto the fire escape here, looking out, and there's just big chunks of, you know, ash coming down, and, you know, it was right when it all began. So that, we didn't get very far in that one. And then I had another one where we're required, we have various regional plans that we have to have public input on, and so we scheduled one here. And I set it all up like this, and, you know, we had another person from our group here, and I think it was at 7 o'clock, and no one showed up. So waited till about 7:15 and packed up all my stuff, and I got to about the door. And one guy came in, he says, "I'm a little late, but I want to hear the presentation." So back to here, we set the whole thing up and went through it, and spent close to 2 hours. He was into it. You know, that's, whether it's 1 or 50, you got to do the show. So that's, but tonight we're going to talk about...
I already have a question.
Oh, yeah.
The ex officio, I think what I heard was that they are part of the board and they are a part of the discussion, but it was just your personal opinion that they shouldn't really do that? Yeah.
They, by statute, the first selectman, not anybody else, just the first selectman, not the other selectmen, are ex officio non-voting members of any board and commission in the town. And, you know, it gets a little bit dicey, I think, when you get into executive sessions and you're talking personnel and all that, but the town is the employer. And that's something, you know, this is an aside, we've been working on in Hartford a little bit, because, like, anybody here from planning and zoning? Okay. Under the statute, you have the right to appoint the ZEO, the zoning enforcement officer. And where we've run into trouble is that they want to appoint a person, the town doesn't want to employ the person. Or the person's already the ZEO and they violated town policies, and now the first selectman has to take an action. But they really like him at planning and zoning, and so they don't want to unappoint him. And this is something that way, way back. And it's just, it's an antique, and it really gets in the way of operating towns, because the way the CEO is set up, they're an at-will employee. They're subject to all the policies of the town, and you're not an employer. You know, the zoning board of appeals. You wouldn't want to go to a CHRO, Human Rights and Opportunities hearings, or to Department of Labor and all that. Kevin has to deal with that, and the labor attorney and all those costs. So it gets really a little hairy at times.
In our case, our CEO is also a union.
Yeah.
So that adds
further
more to that
complicates
level
it.
of what do you do.
That's true about anything that gets elected. Somebody gets elected and then they're in a position that they're being paid. So you still have that same problem. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I just wanted to say, I noticed that the selectmen, part of their duty as selectmen is to oversee the boards and commissions. So they really do need to know what's going on.
Not really. I mean,
By charter,
I mean,
yes.
well, yeah, I mean, your charter, you have a charter. It's an interesting charter. It's a little thin.
Yeah.
That's
It's a powerful charter, so try changing
if
it.
you took, you know, you have a huge ordinance book that goes on for it takes up quite a bit of space. This is not part of this, but, you know, and if you look at other communities' charters, a good portion of what you have as ordinance would be in the charter. And, you know, and I'm going to mention something about that in a little bit, but, so, I mean, but amending charters is so damn hard.
It is.
And it was interesting, is a few years ago, the legislature passed almost unanimously in House and Senate a bill that would allow a town like Plainfield to amend their charter and just go in on one question. And because right now, if you go in and amend the chart to do a charter revision commission, they can look at anything. And then all of a sudden you've got 15 things that they're debating and nothing gets done, and it takes them 18 years, and it, you know, they put on, you know, 12 things on a ballot. Nothing happens. So this surgical amendment sounded good. Governor Malloy didn't agree, and he vetoed it. And the leadership, for whatever reason, decided not to make an attempt to override the veto. So it's still a big impediment. Because a lot of these charters were written a long time ago, and they really aren't really relevant. in many ways. Like some of your ordinances are a bit old or dated. So,
Can I ask a question on that? If we don't have enough members show up, can a selectman be appointed like an alternate to vote on a board?
it's not a voting member, so it's not going to give you a quorum. It won't give you a quorum.
Okay.
It's the voting members present. And if you don't have a quorum, by law, you don't have a meeting. And if you don't have a meeting, everything stops. There's some folks who have this mistaken understanding that, well, we're all here, except we don't have a quorum, so we'll just discuss everything and we'll vote later. Or they'll start their activity, say the meeting's supposed to start at 6:30. They don't have a quorum. Well, we'll review the minutes. We'll begin the first public hearing. We'll start the next meeting, and then Joe shows up and says, "Oh, we got a quorum. Let's go back and vote on this." That's not proper. And 9 times out of 10, not going to be a problem until somebody appeals, because you are almost never going to get overridden in a court on policy. A decision based on your regulations, based on the policies, whatever they might be. If you violate procedure, statutory procedure, Robert's rules different. Statutory procedure, that's where you get in trouble. So if you do that kind of scenario, they could invalidate the whole thing and make you do it again. And no one's going to jail or paying a fine, but it's work wasted. So that's where you've got to be aware of that. But I mean, this is a good place to start with that. I mean, I've been doing this with the NECCOG for just over 29 years, but I've got 40 years of doing public policy in the state. Mostly, I worked for the legislature. I was a lobbyist for a farm organization and deputy commissioner of agriculture. So I've been on more boards, commissions, and task forces and all that, and they're all subject to, legislative oversight, and most of them are supposed to operate, or they think they're going to operate by Robert's rules or a loose version of it. And it's amazing what happens. Just that whole scenario you just were talking about. I mean, I'm the vice chair of a group called the Advisory Commission on Intergovernmental Relations, which is a 25-member body with municipal and state and regional people on it. And the chair will often start the meeting without a quorum and run through it, and then we'll go back and vote. And we've had discussions about it. People have raised issue with it. But, but given the nature of our work, we're not making any decisions on one of your people or that, so no one's really going to challenge it. So, just the fact that you can get away with it doesn't really make it right. So, but I just want to put this up here as, this is for informational purposes. I'm not a lawyer, and you have a town attorney who's quite skilled, and if you have detailed questions, then for particular situations, I mean, I'm not going to get into those, but just general stuff, but you really need to get into it with legal counsel, especially if things are going to be challenged, especially you get a planning and zoning board, they tend to be a frequent flyer to the courts. With some things can get pretty contentious at times. Inland wetlands will be appealed to the commissioner, and then can go to court. So there's different things that end up that way. So, and also, I'm jumping around here, doing half my presentation now, but when you're doing these things, as a board and commission, you always have a blend. And you have the statute, you have a town charter perhaps that may have, you have ordinances, you have your regulations, and you have Robert's rules that keep you going. So they all have to kind of meld in, and you've got to kind of know, you have to know the pecking order. And on the pecking order, Robert's rules or parliamentary procedures can fall in at the bottom. It's sort of what you can, I shouldn't maybe say the bottom, but it's not the stuff that counts whether you did a motion properly. and you get, when something's being challenged. So let's hopefully that worked, okay? So just some general stuff here at first. I mean, parliamentary procedure, parliamentary law, and Robert's rules, it goes back a long way. It goes back to the Romans and the Greeks, and this guy Roberts put this together in 1870 something, I think it is, and has produced a book that you showed me earlier.
A paperback
The brief
copy.
version.
Yeah.
The current version is close to, it's right around 800 pages long, which, yeah.
So after this is a test?
What's that?
After this is a test?
Yes. You only need to know about a page, and you've already got a cheat sheet there that Kevin has provided you. So I always get a little nervous when people bring the book, and and I've seen people try to refer to page 414 and stuff, and it'll make you crazy. But it's a means to let us get together, and so that it's majority rules, but you allow everyone that is assembled, called the minority view, to have their voice heard, and so it's done in a pure democratic way. And I sort of alluded to this. It's a guide. Parliamentary procedure, Robert's Rules is simply a guide. It's a set of, it just gives you sort of the structure to hold a meeting and so forth. It's not the law. If you go in and do a word search in the state statutes, and which are pretty long if you look at it all, it only shows up once, Robert's Rules. And that's for condominium associations, that they're required to use Robert's Rules. There is no requirement to use Robert's Rules. The legislature doesn't use Robert's Rules. They use Masons. Legislators, you tend to see that with legislators, that's more geared towards them. So keep that in mind. Some folks will say, kind of try to equate Robert's Rules and say, well, you didn't make the motion correct, and get a little crazy on this stuff. So I'm probably in your way over there. But it's there to make it easier for you to make decisions, give you that structure, so you can deal with one matter at a time, so you have your agenda, and you're not jumping around and it's sort of chaos. So bring a little order to the whole thing. Everyone's got an equal say. Majority rules, but the minority has their say. So you may have somebody, and most boards and commissions have that person that's always sort of, the squeaky wheel says, yeah, but, or doesn't, has a particular point of view, and they get to be heard. And you get to flesh the whole thing out fully. And also to ask questions, which is something that often doesn't occur, as much as it should. Now, under Section 7 of the statute is got probably 90% of what a town can do, municipal powers. There are places where it's scattered around. That's where you're going to find most of it. Like when we're talking about the ex officio powers of the first selectman, it lays out that in that section. But this does enable towns, to do their business, to do an ordinance to put in parliamentary procedure. So you'll find town charters, ordinances throughout Connecticut that specifically will reference Robert's Rules. Now, you guys don't, at least from my review of it. Doesn't mean you can't do it. And that's something you may want to contemplate doing. And some of them will take selective pieces of it and essentially take that cheat sheet that you all have and memorialize it into an ordinance and say, this is how we want business to be conducted. So, it's something to think about, something to talk with your town attorney on, just to keep, in case you may have a board or a commission that's just doing some wild stuff, just to kind of rein them in, so that you do have, it's majority rules, but maybe that lone voice is not being heard and they're being shut out, and they don't have to be. Just a few things with FOIA. Any board, commission, subcommittee, et cetera, is a public agency by definition and subject to the Freedom of Information Act. So every now and then I'm talking with the town and it's like, how do we beat the act? Well, you don't. If you're going to be in the public business, this is what rules. And just get over it. If you don't like it, I guess the best thing to do is not to participate. But you are, any of these committees, boards, commissions are a public agency. And so everything is open to the public. So there's no closed meetings unless it's a proper executive session. You got to do it in the light of day. Now, one of the things that I often get asked is, well, do we have to have public participation? Well, you don't. By the mere fact that you've noticed the meeting satisfies your need for public participation. That said, it'd be a big mistake not to have let people talk, because there's an expectation that if I'm mad about something or I just want a question, I need to be able to get it. And you do have commissions that in some towns they have no public participation. I have boards of selectmen at times over the years, no public participation. That's why I've served 85 different first selectmen, because some of them they just don't get away with it. And people say, you're done. But you can limit the time that people talk. And the one thing to be really careful of, especially planning and zoning and wetlands, where you're making a regulatory decision, is if someone starts to speak on something that is subject to a public hearing or the deliberations of the commission, and it's not technically ex parte communication, but you're taking in information where the applicant does not have the ability to respond. It may not qualify for a public hearing, so the chair needs to say, stop, and cut them off, because there's a lot of folks who just like they miss the public hearing and they say, well, I'll go to public participation and vent. Can't do it. It can jeopardize your decision, ultimately, especially if you use that information in your decision. And we talked a little bit about this. You have to have a quorum and all to have a meeting. If you don't have a quorum, it's not a meeting. And there's all sorts of things. If you happen to show up and it's a Christmas party and everybody on planning and zoning is there, that's not a meeting. If you go to a Board of Selectmen's meeting, that's not a meeting. So there's a whole slew of those kind of things, just to be aware of. I guess you guys already had a thing on FOIA, I guess. But 3 types of meetings: regular, special, and emergency. By and large, the only group that's going to have an emergency meeting is the Board of Selectmen, and it's probably going to be around a natural disaster or some other severe event. Where sometimes towns get a little bit cute, which is not the way to do this, is they'll have something controversial and they'll have their regular meeting posted like a week before, and they slide in item number 5, which would get 200 people showing up to the town hall. But it's 24 hours beforehand, totally illegal. It's really not in the spirit of regular meeting. And the same with special meetings. It really should be for a legitimate reason. Yes, ma'am. You can't hear me? I'm sorry. I'm just saying, you've got to be careful with how you hold those and how you put out the agenda. You really should have on a regular meeting have that agenda out at least a week in advance, so people can make plans, attend if they wish, etc. And the commissions really, in my view, shouldn't be, waiting to the last minute to post additional items and so forth. You have the right in a regular meeting with a 2/3 vote to add things to the agenda, but again, they should be things that need to be dealt with right then, not something where you're going to approve a 42-lot subdivision on such and such road and say, well, yeah, you can do it, but not what you want to do. And executive sessions get abused all the time, and you only have these reasons to go into, which you're talking about employment-related issues, negotiations on litigation, security issues, purchase of real estate, or disclosure of records that are protected under the Act. And if you're not sure, again, talk to the town attorney. And the big thing there, I know I'm off topic here a little bit, but boards of education are the most guilty of that. Any board of education people here? All right, there you go, sorry. Many of the boards, and I hope you don't, just have a standing agenda item, executive session. It doesn't say what it's for, just as executive session. That's not proper under the law. It needs to explain so that folks have a reasonable idea of what it is and what their expectation is. And if it's going to deal with an employee, that employee needs to be notified in advance and has the right to do that either in public or in private. And 29 years ago, when I got asked to be the director here at NECCOG, they said, we'll come up and we'll appoint you and meet the board. I said, okay, that's cool. I didn't know what NECCOG was, to be honest. It was sort of, I needed a job. I go up there to their offices and it's packed and the room is full of people. They hand me an agenda. Item 1, termination of executive director. Item 2, hire me. And they made a motion to go in executive session, and the then current executive director said, I object. You have to give me the option to do this in the light of day, and if you're going to fire me, you're going to do it in the light of day. And it went through a 45-minute, basically, brawl of, not that, your former first selectman, Mr. Sweet, he's kind of a wallflower for those of you that know him. He was the chair at the time. So you can imagine he and Danny Rivero and a few other people that are sort of well known. And they turned to me, and I got hired, and I got back to my office in Hartford, and I said, those folks are crazy. So anyways, but you've got to be aware of what these are. And again, your best guidance is, that's where it can come in handy, having your first selectman there, watching it, not necessarily being in the ex officio. If they're starting to drift off the, that's where you can maybe come up and say, I'm going to exercise my right and say, point of order.
And one of the things I caution people when they go to executive session as they come out of executive session, that they shouldn't be making motions inside executive session. So when you come out, the obvious thing is, I'd like to come out of executive session at this time without any action taken. So that way it's clear on the record so that people know that nothing was done during the meeting.
Exactly. So what's a good meeting? Just a question for you guys. Anybody? When you attend one, hopefully this is a good one, but it's, I've been to a lot of bad ones, and they don't start on time. They're not sure what they're doing. Half the members haven't brought their meeting materials with them, that kind of thing. It's just sort of chaos. And so, out in, where did I get this from? University of Wisconsin. They did some polling and stuff and says, just one that, allows things to be done efficiently so the board can get to it and do its work and stay on track and stay on their agenda and not deviate off of it. And you do see, not so much, you'll see a board of selectmen, board of finance, pretty much stay to their agendas. Planning and zoning, wetlands. Some of the other boards and commissions, an ag commission, for instance, or a conservation commission can go sideways pretty fast because it tends to be a looser agenda, and they're not making those regulatory decisions.
Our ag is very good.
What's that?
Our ag
Not our ag
commission, very
commission,
good.
maybe killing leave, but not
There you go.
ours.
Well, what those-
Conservation, maybe,
The farmers. So, you want to be known as a place that's a good meeting. And the key to the whole thing is the chair. How many chairs do we have here? We got 1, 2, 3. So, you guys are the leaders of your commissions. You've got to run it. And you got to have a good relationship with whatever staff you have from the town hall. Hopefully you've got good staff. You got to know FOIA, whatever your regulations are, Robert's rules, whatever you're using. And you got to put together an agenda that makes sense and that is achievable. Sometimes, I'm not going to name the town, but I can pick on Killingly. They will have agendas that, I mean, there's no way, even if nobody objected to anything, you can complete it before midnight if you start at 7. That's kind of crazy. So you have to, you have things you have to do with certain boards and commissions, but if you can keep it in a 2-hour block, that's about the limits of people, volunteering here. And, the UConn game starts in like an hour, or it's opening day for the Red Sox too. So you got to make sure that everything's posted and all that stuff together, and just again, going back to Robert's rules, make sure that everyone's got their voice is heard at that. So you're sort of the conductor, the orchestra leader of your commission. So I mean, they're just key to the whole thing. So keep the cheat sheet that you've got, or even a simpler one, the one-pager. And then if you make a mistake, no one's going to throw you out of the room. Just, when you figure it out, say, hey, I screwed up, fix it, and move on. And then, respect the other members, and, try to keep it not so strict to the rules. I mean, you want to keep the guide rails that Robert's Rules Parliamentary stuff allows you, but don't use it as a way to intimidate members where they don't want to participate. Because folks will come back and say, I'm not going back to that. I got more to do than volunteer to do that. And then your basic agenda, which you're probably all familiar with, but having a standard agenda so folks know what to see, both members and the public, and lay it out there. And I don't know, do you have a standardized agenda for all the boards and commissions?
No. Some of this, and that's what I was just looking at here. You've got, most of them have the public participation in the front before your action items, because it allows the public to have input on what you have on the agenda, or if there are things you could have an actionable vote on. Some boards have it at the end, which I think is difficult, because now they have no public participation in what may be going on, so it does make it difficult.
Yeah. I mean, you have to be, I think you need to have it. You have to be careful that it doesn't seep into the substance of things where public participation is not proper, especially if you're making a regulatory decision. And I always recommend put a time limit on it, because the worst thing is you public participation and you see this person comes up and they've got a loose leaf binder full of 12 pages of stuff, and they're going to read it to you. If you don't have a time limit, they're going to read it to you, and whether it makes sense or not.
Without having the public hearing in the beginning, it's like the fourth item is like roll call. I was told in the beginning to follow the agenda, so I did roll call before our regular meeting. Should you really do it before the public meeting, or should you do it before the regular meeting? Roll call.
It depends if you need to verify you have a quorum. I would do it then at the beginning.
At the beginning, before the public meeting.
Well, I mean, a public hearing can be part of a meeting.
Right.
And so when you call the meeting to order, you've got a quorum, and you get that roll call so that you can put that in the minutes that these are the folks that were here, and especially now that you have some folks are attending online on that. And there's nothing wrong with doing, public participation, as long as it doesn't relate to the public hearing, then you got to cut them off. But public hearing as an agenda item, I mean, you can do, a lot of folks do, places do this, is they'll adjourn the regular meeting and open up a public hearing, then close the public hearing, and then go into, it's whatever you're comfortable with. I think either way works. I defer to your attorney for that one, but I don't see where you basically have to have two in one.
I also, when you set a time limit, what happens if people continue, like they've already got spoken, sit back down, get up again because somebody else made a comment?
I think just like, it happens, I see it all the time over the years of the legislature, is the bell goes off, the 3 minutes are up, or the 2 minutes are up, and there's 15 more people that want to speak, and you start doing the math, and you go, okay, we're going to be here for a long time. And you give them a little leeway, but you'd say, can you summarize the rest of your statement?
Yeah, but like a repeat person, they've already got up, spoken, and then they want to get up again, and again, and again.
It can be heard one time, just like a member, but until everyone else has had their chance to speak. Because a public hearing is not a debate. And I think I'm giving away a slide up here, but the worst thing you can have as a commission is someone testifies, somebody on the commission asks a question, maybe it gets a little elevated, and they get mad, and now you're having a debate. That's not a hearing. That's not productive. Taking your information, that's what they're there for. It's a hearing, it's not a hearing, not a debate. But you see it in Congress, you'll see senators screaming at people, and House members do that. And unfortunately, it's even creeping into our General Assembly, where you never had that before, but you're having more. And part of it is because there's everything's televised, and you get your little clip for TV.
So what do you do when that happens? You're at a meeting and that's happening over there.
What's that?
Somebody on the board and somebody in the audience.
The chair.
The chair, okay.
The chair's obligation there is to maintain control, and it's like you're the coach of the team, and your player's going off. You gotta grab your player and stop. Now, you're dealing with people and personalities, and you only have so much control, but you try.
So worst case scenario now, it's going on, the chair doesn't do anything. So the whole meeting is kind of like out of control, then what happens?
If I don't mind, yeah. Well, you are a member of that board, so you can say point of order. And you can bring it to their attention that there's something that needs to be addressed. So it could be up to you to help to bring them back down.
If you've agreed to the ground rules that we're going to do one issue at a time, then you can, with that point of order, that can also bring it back. But it also depends on your commission member, primarily respecting that structure that you want to be on. The public coming in, that's a wild card, and you can't necessarily, that you're going to control it. Thankfully, that's the odd thing, not the normal thing. So for the members, this is important too, and I have lost track over the years of how many times I've gone to, especially planning and zoning, where I'm there to talk about their regulations, and nobody except me has a copy of the regulations. That's just, and that, you can't believe how many times that occurs. Where I'll quote a part of the regulations and say, well, that's not, I've had chairs say, well, that's not our regs. I'll say, well, it's on page 87. And it's amazing when folks have never read the regulations. So one of the real, and this goes for everyone, on any board or commission, if there are a set of regulations or a charge from, say the Board of Selectmen has set up something, they need to understand it, and if they don't understand it, ask questions. Ask a lot of questions. You probably should once a year, if you're planning and zoning, is go through your regulations and how do they work and not work. Wetlands is the same, because it's just critical that you know what they are. Because I can guarantee the folks that are coming in that want to put a business in or a subdivision, they know your regs. We've dealt twice in my time here with Walmart. They have an attorney that's, he's a great guy. He knows those he knows the ins, the outs, everything on those. Although, I will tell you, this is, I think, humorous. We had a hearing on the Putnam Walmart, and they were doing some changes up there. So the attorney had called me and said, what can I expect? And I said, well, they got split commission up there. They have a zoning board and a planning board. So this was before the zoning, so it's 5 people. So Walmart gave their big presentation. There's nobody in the audience except me, because I was there for another reason with the commission that night. And so they get to questions. And this lady on the commission, she raised her hand and said, when you started expanding, you put food in the place, you took out all the yarn and fabric. And this attorney was baffled. He said, well, I'll take you at your word. And she just said, I'll tell you right now, if you don't put back the yarn and the fabric, I'm voting no. And another member of the questions. So you never quite know what you're going to get in these hearings, but you got to go with it. So, arrive on time, it's self-evident. Bring the documents. Don't be reading them for the first time, especially if you're in a decision-making piece. It doesn't give the applicant a lot of confidence there. And make sure everything has to go through the chair. Don't speak directly to another member or an applicant. You ask that you talk to everything goes through the chair. And it becomes second nature if you do it the right way. And this stuff is, as far as interrupting other members. The other thing, the last one there, and maybe you talked about this with FOIA, I don't know if you did, or ethics. Have you done an ethics one?
Yeah.
But conflicts are real or perceived. In almost all instances, you have to self-regulate. So it's not where the chair says, you have a conflict, you can't do anything, you should be out. No, you have to say, well, I can't do this because I've got a personal stake in it. You have to recuse yourself, which means don't walk to the back of the room and stare at everybody, leave the room. But it's better to, take a walk than have people say, well, Kevin has got a stake in this thing. What's he doing voting? What's he doing asking questions? I had a wetlands commission in Woodstock where this guy was really aggressively asking questions of the applicant, blah, blah, blah. And then they closed the hearing and they went to vote. And he said, well, I have to recuse myself. And, that went to court. The town attorney called me the next day and said, what the hell happened? And they had to deal with it in court. So some of the basic rules of Robert's rules, you deal with one subject at a time. Negative motions, you move to do something, you don't move not to. So it's just sort of a standard way. One person speaks at a time. Everybody's got an equal say or an equal opportunity to say something. And things are brought to a full debate. So as chairs, you don't cut it off and say, well, we've had enough. Fortunately, you got to let it roll on. There's ways to shorten things, but you don't want to use that final thing there, parliamentary procedure. It's a tool. It's not something just to beat people over the head with. And I've seen that, and it's not pretty, and usually discourages people from wanting to participate. So you've got 4 basic motions: main, subsidiary, privileged, and incidental motions. That's all you need to know, and that's in your cheat sheet, I'm sure. So main motions is the most important one. That gets things going. That's the start. So you've got an item on the agenda. Someone makes a motion to approve item 1, blah, blah, blah. And that starts the things rolling, and then you need a second to do that. And once you get a second, it's now on the floor, and it's the property of the commission. It's no longer the property of the person making the So oftentimes you say, well, I made a motion and it's seconded, I want to withdraw. Well, most times they'll let you do that, but it's not your decision. It has to be a vote to do that. So that's an important thing that people don't always, do. But most times it's, cordial and you can get things done that way. So subsidiary motions, this is where it gets interesting and maybe fun during the meetings. This is when, now that you have a main motion on the floor and someone proposes an amendment to that. It has to be related to the main motion, and it can't be phrased to defeat the motion. So you're trying to modify it, but you're not trying to by doing that, just kill it. If you want to kill it, vote no. Two amendments can be on the floor at the same time. This is where it can get really confusing. So you kind of deal with them in reverse order on that. Again, they all have to be dealt with. When you got an amendment, only the amendment can be debated. So you deal with the thing that's in front of you, not with the main motion, that kind of stuff. So again, it really requires any of these motions really requires the chair to be on top of it and say, well, that's not, we're out of order, sequence and that. So, and to know when things are debatable and that type of thing. So you have other things in there where you can move to table something and put it off for later in the meeting. You can put it off for a meeting in the future. You have to be really careful though if you're, say, a wetlands or a zoning commission, because putting it off may kill it. Because you have certain statutory deadlines that you have to, parameters that you have to operate within. So you don't want to, even though you think it's a great idea to table it, hopefully somebody there, the chair, the staff is on top of it and say, you got to deal with it. Or it may be that you get an extension, which is particular to that thing that's under the statute. And you can call a question or close debate, and some folks think that just stops everything and kills it all. No, that goes to the full body. You've got to get it requires a second. It's not debatable, and it needs 2/3 majority. So it's pretty simple, but a lot of folks just say, oh, they call the question and the whole world's, stop the world, I got to get off. Doesn't work that way. So you got privilege motions. So you can make it a motion to adjourn. You can make that at any time. Second is required. It's not debatable, not amendable, and then if folks want to stop, you can stop. You can call it recess, which is not for most commissions. You're not going to get into that. You can get a point of privilege or a point of order, depending on what word you want to use there, but where you want to raise a question. No second, it's not debatable, no vote required, it's always in order. You can just sort of say, hey, wait, what's going on? Are we doing it correctly? So, yeah, and so never be afraid to stop, and say, hey, then it's best to say, Mr. Chair, I don't know what's happening here, but I think it's a little odd, Say it nicely, nicer than I just said. You can appeal the decisions of the chair, and majority votes required to do that. And it has to be second, it can't be amended, and basically you can have a debate on what's going on there with that. You can make a parliamentary inquiry, and you can make a motion to withdraw a motion. And you got instant move. And then you have, and this sort of floats around it, is you have renewal motions for reconsideration. This doesn't happen all that often, and it gets a little tricky, especially with statutory deadlines for those making decisions that way, where folks on the prevailing side can bring back an issue and have it reconsidered, redebated by the body. Not that it doesn't happen, but it does happen, but there's a process for which you can do that. Also, taking things off the table, you need to go in and vote and do that to bring it back off. So what I've got here, and this is probably in your cheat sheet, right? So you basically go through, and I kind of talk, you raise your hand and you say, to make your motion, you state what the motion is, hopefully in a clear and concise way. That's not the time where you're trying to explain why you're doing it or what it is. It's just I'm making a motion to do this. If it's seconded, then the chair will move it on. If it's not, it dies right there. So it's always best for the chair to restate the motion so that the clerk gets it clear, sort of double checks for wording and so forth. Sometimes it's going to be important to actually write the whole thing out, especially if it's, again, it's some regulatory thing, again, like use zoning. Sometimes folks will have the town attorney right there, and the town attorney will write the motion out. That's not a bad idea because you want the wording to be the way you want it. Because like with zoning, there's two schools of thought. One is you just make a motion to approve XYZ application, and you don't give reasons why. And there's the other school of thought where you give 18 reasons why. Well, if you give 18 reasons why and it's appealed, those 18 reasons are what the judge can look at. If you don't say anything, the judge looks at the total record. And some attorneys think that letting the judge mull through everything is the best approach, and others say, no, lay it all out. And since they're the ones that have to defend you, I would just would defer to them. So you get that. You can then now we get the time where we get the debate and other amendments to it, and then finally put it to a vote. So it's a progression. And again, you're staying with the one topic. You can go this way or that way, but you're on the one. And it's all there again to give you that structure to steer you in. And then everything needs to be documented, especially those that are making approvals there. So your minutes need to reflect that. And just a note here, minutes are not transcripts, and a lot of folks try to do that where, Kevin said such and such and such. Well, it doesn't need to, it says you can have it very generalized, and all too often they get too long. And if it's in there that way, that can come back to haunt you. If it's, again, there. But you want to have that, whatever motions accurately depicted to the word in your minutes, so that, again, if it's challenged or questioned, this is what we did, and this is why we did it, and this is how we did it. And also demonstrating that you used a parliamentary procedure, such as Robert's Rules, also shows if it's appealed that you were making every due diligence in trying to do it in a proper and effective manner. So it's all good stuff. And the cheat sheet. This is really all you need to know. Okay, is that the same one that's in here? I can make that available to you, but that's really, these are the only 99 times out of 100, this is all you're going to need to know with regard to parliamentary procedure to make it work for your board or commission. So that book that you have over there, that's actually the one in brief, there's a nice thing that you can buy it from Amazon for $7. That's it's sort of a menu card that comes out, but it's way too detailed, too much stuff, too much information. I don't need that. This is pretty much all you need. It may be different when you get to a town meeting, and you've got, I don't know how many people you get in here for, a town meeting or something like that, but there's where you want to be probably more formally. You probably want a town attorney sitting over here, so that if you do get into something contested, but 9 times out of 10, 99 out of 100, for your boards and commissions, this is all you're going to need right here. Now, the other thing you can do is you can go to Robert's Rules website. A lot of good information there, a lot of Q&A as to what about this, what about that. And again, you have to take it in the context of Connecticut law, your local regulations, charter, ordinance, etc. But that's a good place to go. Come on. And anybody ever heard of Jurassic Parliament? Jurassic Parliament is a website that's maintained by, I forget her name, but she's a parliamentarian and does, produces, she has podcasts and books, and she'll do she has training videos and all that stuff on parliamentary procedure. And it's really a wealth of information. It's like it's really a one-stop site. And it's really worth taking a look at if you want to dive a little bit deeper in this, or just have another reference as to what should I do. It may be something you can look into. Maybe that's something you do for the town. And then you've talked with Russell at FOIA. I mean, you need always like mix those, and again, your town attorney. And so I'll end with, this is Henry Martin Robert. He started all this stuff. Well, he's not getting the royalties on this book anymore, but he's would be about 147 years old or something at this point. But you're just trying to give, again, as we started off, that some structure and some predictability to meetings, so that people want to come back, and people that are observing it have faith that you did the best job. And that's, in a nutshell, what Robert's Rules is. So I hope this is helpful, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Just one quick one. You said you have a cheat sheet you share with me?
Yeah.
I'd like to do that if you offer it up on the town website, so we can get into it and it's right there.
Yeah, because I think almost every member should just have that
Right.
in front of them. Because you get into the, there's all sorts of good ones. This is probably a great one with the 5 pages. But you don't want to be wrestling through. You just want to laminate it, put it on the inside, cover your regs.
And practice.
And do that. Yes.
So if one of the boards or commissions has action items, and during discussion we decide, or we feel that we need to add a new action item that was not necessarily included on the agenda the first time, is there can the chairperson say, at the end of the meeting, is there any new or unfinished business that needs to become to the board, and then have that motion happen, or do we have to move to add that and then move that again to discuss and vote?
In a regular meeting, yes. I'll go back to a special meeting, no. Special meeting, whatever's on the agenda,
Sure.
that's it. A regular meeting, typically at the front part of the meeting, and I actually should have had it here, I know for my NECCOG meetings, there's a standard slot there, other agenda items. 2/3 vote of the quorum present can add an item, and if it's an action item, we add it to the end of the action items. If it's a discussion item, it's in that. So you just place it at the end of wherever it might be. Again, there's some discretion there with the chair. If somebody makes that motion and the chair sees, oh my God, that's going to be like 3 hours and whatever, maybe the suggestion is made. You can make it an agenda item for the next meeting, so people can get information on it, and it's just not hitting them cold at 10 o'clock at night, and you're going, oh my God, what do I do with this? And it's not going to do the proponent of it any good to throw it at the end if it's going to be a talker. That's what we call it at the legislature, is hate the talkers. And usually with the talkers, and people are already tired, half the room empties out. They don't show you on TV is when one of those talkers comes up, and like in the House of Representatives in Connecticut, it's 151 people. Well, certain people get up to talk, 140 of them leave and go get on the phone, watch TV, and do other things. And there's like 4 people in the house. But they have a policy, they don't show that. So, yes, sir.
You made a comment that the board and commission shouldn't be looking at things for the first time that night. How soon should they be getting their information from the town staff?
I think for
So wetland zoning,
they should be getting the packet, ideally, I think, at a minimum of 7 days out.
a pack more detailed than just the agenda.
Yes.
I'll be back up, David.
You know, most of the, we're town planner for Woodstock, Eastford, and Sterling. So our guys try to assemble that because you've got those applications in and so forth. And you may have notes from the planner or the zoning enforcement officer, and that gets out so the members can make an intelligent decision. And they're not seeing a lot of stuff. Or just depending on, the applicant just providing 100% of the information verbally, and it may not jive with what's on paper. So yeah, I think that the last thing that you want to do is get a document dump. Out of it, you get a packet like this or something, and you go, how am I going to read? And you're trying to read it.
For a month, and we really should be a week ahead. Because like we have select meetings by, twice a month.
Yeah.
So I try to get like a week before.
So sometimes we'll get the agenda, we'll get a staff report, but it's very vague, it's not enough details so you know what you're coming to look at. A lot of times I have to look it up myself, try to figure out what's going on with the address or a map number to try to figure out what lots are you talking about.
Well, like a zoning enforcement officer, wetlands enforcement officer, if it's economic development commission, economic development, you should probably agree on what's your standard report that you want to see, in terms of the level of detail. Instead of, I went there, it looked good. Heard that more times than from wetlands guys. You see any problem? No.
Well, I find it to be annoying when the applicant gets up and says, well, I forwarded you all that information, so you guys have all seen that. Never saw that. So you have to stop the meeting and look at it from the town staff before you can do anything.
It slows things down, it doesn't build goodwill, and it makes for bad decisions. Because there may be something in there. You got a wetlands, commission that is looking at possible alternatives. And, the applicant's going to take the most direct way in. I would too. But maybe that's not even been looked at, and you don't know that until the staff report comes in and then just says, oh yeah, it looks good because they only looked at that. And maybe there's something that doesn't cause as much damage to the wetland that you wanted to consider. I don't know.
After I get my information, zoning board here, if I have questions on it, I'll call and, ask the questions to further the information.
Well, I've gotten my information the day before the meeting, get that at times.
Well, it's at least a week before.
Yeah,
It's
that's
not
fine.
always consistent.
Yeah.
I would just ask if you wouldn't mind at the next meeting to bring that up.
Yeah.
Maybe we can work on fixing that.
Yeah, because that does help in Ryan's left over, but when I'm trying to walk me through it, some of the information that I don't know, and I'm trying to, but yeah, a day of that.
The other thing I'll just throw out, I do this when I do wetlands commission trainings. I'm a believer that they should not go on a sidewalk. Is anybody from the Wetlands Commission here? Right. You a soil scientist? So what happens, you go out on those things and you look at stuff, and it looks okay. It doesn't look wet. Well, it's a soils-based decision, really. It's wetland soils in Connecticut. It's not the vegetation. It's not that it's wet or it's dry. It can look totally dry and it's wetland. You really got to, that's where you depend on the soil scientists, the engineers, the experts to give you the staff to give you the information. Too often when you're out there in a field, the applicant's got a bunch of people with them and they sort of divide and conquer. Now each one is getting maybe information that really the group should be getting. And if you get into a challenge, that's where they start picking you apart. And I've just seen too much mischief over the years on those sidewalks. Some of these developers, they're pretty adept at, they're good, maybe good lobbyists, trust me.
I had spent a question on what I wanted to do a site. I said, well, why can't the board do a site walk? And said, well, but you can't, but then it's a legality, because then it has to be posted as a public hearing or a public meeting or something. And so that has to be posted. And then everybody has to, go, and that's the whole.
And it's private property, and then sometimes the applicant, oh, wait a minute, I don't want these people on there. And, you get it, and if that's the case, everything has to stop.
We just did one about a month, like 2 months ago. We took a walk just to look at the path they wanted to take, because there was a channel that was questionable. And the soil scientist from the developer was with us, and he explained what he thought.
I mean, that's where you really need the experts, because it's nothing worse than hearing like a wetlands commission have a debate over a 6-inch pipe and a 12-inch pipe. None of them are engineers, and none of them are builders, and it's like, well, 12-inch pipe probably make more sense. And you may get an engineer and say, well, it's going to be, it's a box culvert, and who knows? That's where it makes sense to employ the experts and trust the experts. And most, I don't know how your regs are, but like on a wetlands, they'll have a thing that the applicant's going to pay for these experts. I'm paraphrasing it, but pretty effective. You go out and on a spot basis, there are all sorts of tricky situations that involve personalities and all that stuff. Half of it is people to people, just getting along. Yes, sir.
Is there a reason on your agenda that you put action items and then discussion items?
I don't even know. I can't recall what I had there, but usually I put discussion. It really doesn't make any difference on the order, I don't think. Discussion should not turn into action.
Right.
They could by a 2/3 vote, but I think there you get into the whole spirit of transparency and all that, where all of a sudden something that folks thought was they're just going to have a chat about the thing turns into a motion to
We've just changed our agendas, thanks to Kevin, and now they put after it that it is an action item.
Yeah.
So it's very clear what our action items.
You want the public to have a very firm expectation of what you're going to do. And more so when it's, a board and commission, not that all of them don't have consequence, but some have a little bit more than others. When you're dealing with a budget matter, with the Board of Finance, or most of the issues you're going to deal with the Board of Selectmen, planning and zoning, wetlands. It's a little bit less with some of the others because they're not making those same kind of decisions that are subject to statute and so forth. They may be real important, like an Economic Development Commission, maybe dealing with some new venture or something, or Ag Commission or Rec Commission or whatever. Not to offend anybody that is on those commissions, but you're not making a decision that's going to weave its way into Superior Court. And that's where you also don't want to get gun shy where you're being sued 12 times, because that can make people when my wife and I moved into the town we're in, the first selectman came to us and said, okay, which boards and commissions you want to be on? I said, John, we'll put you on planning and zoning, which was a nightmare, but that's the end of the story. My wife agreed to be on resource recovery. Literally the next day, whatever it was, the sheriff or the marshal shows up, and she's named in a suit. Because the commission is being sued now, you remember the commission? It's like, what? And it took about 6 months to get her off of that thing. Yeah, it's crazy. Welcome to town government. You know, but I did planning and zoning board of appeals, and in the case of my town, it was commissions in weight of lawsuits. It was just wild west. And they weren't following Robert's rules. They weren't following statute. You could talk to your blue in the face, and I finally had to just say, well, done. And that's unfortunate, because if you don't have that sort of structure, you're going to lose a lot of good people, from volunteering and or even running for some of these. Do you have elected commissions?
We're both elected and appointed.
Those are fun. That's that'd be a whole other forum.
I have one more question.
Sure.
Hey, you mentioned recusing yourself. Okay, say it's just that I'm going to recuse myself for appointing her to the EDC. Do we have to get up and leave the room, for a 1 minute?
I think, if there's going to be, you kind of use common sense. There's going to be a debate on things. Like we had an instance where there was a major development going in, and one of the board members on planning and zoning, it was their land that was going to happen on. And what that person chose to do was to sit, back where the white table is, with their arms folded. And it's just not right, and sort of stare down the commission.
Because it's discussion.
Yeah.
Just appointing somebody.
Yeah, it's sort of
just sit and shut your mouth.
Yeah,
Right.
But that kind of thing,
Or even say that, like we had, before we had like 4 or 5 people, and like I recused myself for this.
Right, and I had for her on
Right, so that
EDC.
makes it very quick.
But we didn't get up.
I should also say, and usually it doesn't have to get this formal, but if it is sort of contested, if you're the chair, and you're going to get into the debate, it's best to hand the gavel off to the vice chair, and then do your thing, because that way you diminish any claim that you're a bias and you're trying to steer the debate.
So
We'll still do that, but
that when he recused himself for voting on his wife, he should have passed on to vice chair.
If you're going to get into it, you should.
Just to call that motion.
Yeah. Just for that one brief moment.
Yep.
And then it just looks better.
Okay.
People may still question it, but you made an effort. People are going to say what people are going to say.
Try to fix
Kind of this game.
possible.
Yeah. So, what are you going to do? It's a little tough. Yeah. So, use your cheat sheets and enjoy it. That's the best thing.
Ask a question. Would it be possible to put that cheat sheet slide back on? I'll take a picture of it.
Sure.
It might work.
You can have it on the town website as well, so if you want to get it there. You're either going to have a really good eyesight or a really good camera.
Really good. It's amazing how, this shows up on.
I think I know Chris.
I better.
I'll hear about it if it's not there.
Any number
I
of
definitely
towns,
don't want
this
to
is on their website.
I did parliamentary procedure.
guess we won't do that. Might as well take a shot of it.
You say, again,